Hey everybody, it's the meeting of the Brisbane InDesign user group that never really quite happened because I think Facebook didn't notify people like they usually do, and certainly like they used to. So I've got a recording. It's probably a little bit flaky, but we'll go with it, and you don't need to see me anyway. Let's look at the screen. This won't take too long. So welcome to this short meeting of the Brisbane InDesign user group. Here we are in May with the new InDesign logo and splash screen to enjoy. So I should mention that if you are a teacher and you're interested in learning more about Adobe stuff, then check this out, the Adobe Creative Educator Program, and also the Inject Creativity Live Show. They're both free and worth checking out. So if you're Adobe related, if you teach any cool Adobe stuff, then check them out. They are free. And there is going to be a PDF of these notes available, so you don't have to type these in. I should thank City Desktop, who I do some training for. Now, we're not actually using any of their tech this evening, but hey, they're nice people. And if you want to learn tech in a classroom setting, then absolutely, good place to go. Otherwise, trainingbrisbane.com, that's me. I do one-to-one training, but I don't have training manuals. So if you want a training manual, go to City Desktop. And if you're happy to be trained one-on-one, or you want to learn Final Cut Pro, then sure, hit me up. I also wrote a new book. It's out. It's over 750 pages, about 150,000 words. It's available now. It's actually on sale from May. Details are at the website there, fcpefficientediting.com, and this is the book. It's real, it's huge, it's a good read, I think. Alrighty, enough blarg. What are we going to talk about? There's a tiny bit of news, and then I'm going to show you beyond CMYK and sRGB. Now, if you are watching this on YouTube, because you're probably not in the room here with me, do download the PDF of this meeting, because the video recording, ironically enough, does not support Wide Gamut color, and you will have to look along with this presentation in PDF form, which does. So if you're on a Wide Gamut display, so any modern Mac, or on an iPhone or an iPad, grab the link there, trainingbrisbane.com/superbright.pdf, and everything should look awesome. Then you'll understand what on earth I'm talking about. Okay, news. So we still have COVID here in Australia, but the Edge is now open. So I suspect the next meeting will probably be in person back at the Edge. Yay! With plenty of notice. Yay! And if you have a new M1 Mac, which I do, a new MacBook Air, it's excellent. At the moment, they're all the same speed. So if you've got a new iMac or MacBook Pro, Mac Mini, MacBook Air, they're all going to be roughly the same speed, and Adobe have been updating their apps to be fast on them. If you've got an M1 Mac, definitely get them. There's Photoshop is out of beta, InDesign and Illustrator are both in beta, and the other apps are in progress as well. So they're going pretty well. And if they're native, they are faster, they use less battery. And if they're not native yet, they should still work just as they did on the older machines, but they'll just be maybe a little slower than they would be otherwise. So I'm not going to demo these. New Photoshop is excellent, super fast, really appreciated. The new M1 Macs are terrific, if you didn't know, and just as a quick recap, Apple are transitioning all their Macs from Intel chips to their own Apple silicon chips. Currently they're all based on the M1 chip, but we suspect, the rumor mill suspects, that there will be an upgraded chip, maybe an M1X, maybe an M2, maybe in July or June, something like that. For some of the Pro Macs, like the MacBook Pro, and maybe a bigger iMac. We'll see. They are ridiculously fast. They're blowing away most machines, Mac or PC, desktop or laptop, and amazing battery life as well. They're really, really good. So nothing wrong with them. If you're considering buying a Mac, great choice. Get a new one. Get the new M1 Mac, not an older Intel one. Now, if you have old school Mac stuff, if you're still running any 32-bit apps, and I have a few, you won't be able to run them, and you won't be able to boot into Windows because you can't run older operating systems. And yeah, you can't run x86 operating systems like Windows because you just can't do it. You can still do virtualization. There are some workflows, but if you do need to run those apps, you may want to keep an old Mac around just for those. Cool. That's it for the main news preamble, let's talk about beyond CMYK and sRGB. Now, in the bad old days, I used to be a retoucher in London, and for my purposes, the bad old days is roughly 2001 through 2004. Before we had system-wide color correction, you would have to manually calibrate your monitors. So this is giant CRTs. We had a printout, and every month we'd make sure the file that was used to create that printout, and that was made by creating film and giving that to the man who ran the Chromelin thing down the back of the unit. We'd compare that to the screen and adjust it to make sure it was perfect. It was a bit weird, and that was the approach that a lot of people took for a long time, but we now have system-wide color correction. Before then, like when you just said, RGB, let me give me the full strength red, no green, no blue, you just get the best red the screen could do. It's a little bit different now. But Safari and Final Cut Pro have been color managed for ages. The Mac system has been color managed since the 90s. So on the Mac at least, everything has been working well for a while. This hasn't been universal across all the Adobe apps. So Premiere has only had color management for I think the last year or two. And web browsers as well have only just recently got it. But all the Adobe apps have had it for ages. Okay, so what is color management? Well, it's a color profile. In a few different places. So devices need color profiles, and your output devices and displays both need color profiles. Okay, so the diagram there is choosing on my iMac. It came with a color profile. I could choose one of these other color profiles, and I could use a calibrator to generate a new color profile if I wanted to. And what the profile brings is consistency. So ideally, the colors which I see on my iMac screen are the same colors I see on another screen which is also calibrated or has an accurate profile. Now, in the video realm, not everything is calibrated. Not everything observes profiles. So there's a very popular app called VLC, which doesn't care what color profile your monitor has. So if you have a wide gamut display, it doesn't care. It'll just show the wrong colors. So be really careful if you're watching video. Just watch it through a browser, through Vimeo or YouTube, which is how your clients are going to view it after all, or use QuickTime Player on a Mac. So color management is in all the Adobe apps. So if you've been using InDesign, Illustrator, etc., then you have been using a color managed workflow. If you've never paid attention to it, you may be on the North American default settings, and you may want to change that to if you're using what a printer recommends more locally, you may get more accurate results. Now, color profiles have been supported on the Mac system-wide for years, and in the Adobe apps on PCs for years as well. So if you measure a screen, so you know its capabilities, you can define the color profile you want to use and specify the exact color you want to present. And that's consistent then, no matter what device you're using to print, and no matter what display you're using to display screen-based outputs. Assuming, of course, that you can display those colors on the destination device. Now, most people don't actually calibrate their screens, so this ends up being a little bit theoretical, but they could calibrate their screens, they could use decent screens, and they could get consistency. You can't control what people do. Now, a profile is going to define the range of colors available, and most cheap screens support sRGB. Now, sRGB is a lowest common denominator kind of profile. Nearly every screen should be able to display sRGB. And because different displays do have different capabilities, if you don't say that your images that you're putting out there or other kinds of files are tagged sRGB, then the colors are going to look different on each one. Because you can't just say, give me full strength red, R equals 255, G and B at 0. Because that doesn't mean the same thing on every monitor anymore. Some screens will show a wider range of reds than other screens. And a lot of browsers on the web didn't support color profiles, so this happened quite a bit. And so here's the big test. If you look at this box and you see a solid red block, then that means that the recording wasn't using Wide Gamut, and YouTube didn't display this in Wide Gamut, and or your screen is not Wide Gamut, which is why you want to grab that PDF I linked to earlier, and I'll link underneath the video as well, because that's not a red box. This is a file taken from the link below, and definitely go have a look at that link if you can. All right, so sRGB then is for consistency. If you say your images are sRGB, they look the same everywhere. And that's what mostly happens because most apps default to outputting sRGB, assuming it's an RGB file at all. So Wide Gamut. Why bother with Wide Gamut? Well, I was on Twitter and I saw a tweet by Edgar Wright. He's directed Shaun of the Dead, Baby Driver, many other films. Great director. And he recently was, I think, guest editing a magazine, an edition of Empire. And you can see there, hopefully, on the screen, the masthead is super, super red, super, super bright. Now you see this in real life print magazines all the time. You use neons, you use metallics to grab attention, to try to stand out from everything else. Of course, all the magazines are using metallic or a neon, so it doesn't really work, but that's what they do. But it's using wide gamut colors. It's not sRGB. Okay. Now, this trick would not work on every device, but it will work on most phones. Most phones are sRGB and beyond, so they're wide gamut displays. So they'll all support sRGB. iPhones and other Apple devices are all going to support much wider than that. So if your iPhone is newer than, say, 3 years old, I'm not sure exactly when the shift was made, you can see bright colors like this as well. And the same is true in Android too. This is not an Apple-only thing. Now, just to step back, you've got to remember that CMYK is bad, okay? So if you're producing artwork for screens and you're making everything in CMYK, then your colors are going to be really dull. You can see that picture I've got on the screen right now. We've got the RGB on top and the CMYK below, and you can see how much duller the purple is, how much duller the red is. Making everything CMYK is making all your images and all your colors look boring. Now, sometimes for colors maybe that might be okay because you want consistency between print and screen, and I get it, but your images don't need to be in CMYK in a screen-based PDF. So I would definitely recommend leaving all your images in RGB, convert them to CMYK only at export by using a PDF for print based on the press preset. When you go to the press preset or something based on that, you'll see that it converts all your images to CMYK and leaves the swatches exactly as they are. If you use the PDF interactive option, it'll keep everything as RGB. Now, we'll see why with Wide Gamut this isn't the full story, unfortunately, but that's the standard recommendation. If you don't care about Wide Gamut, just use PDF interactive for screen, PDF print using the press preset when you want a CMYK file. Okay, so if your work is going to end up on screens, you should be using RGB. Now, there's an app here called ColorThink Pro. Now, you can use it as a demo or you can pay for the full version. This is from the demo, and I can show you this live in a sec. But you can see here this inner blob is the range of colors available in CMYK, and the outer one is RGB. Here's looking at the similar thing in a 2D space. Adobe RGB and P3 are both wide gamuts, and that's what this red and green outline is showing you. And even this black one, that's sRGB, while the inner one is a common CMYK standard, coated Fogra 39. Now, I'm just going to bring up ColorThink Pro. So looking at the graph, vertically here, this is lightness or brightness, luma if you're in the video realm. And the other two graphs here go A to B, that's the blue to yellow, and purple to cyan. So the magenta to cyan line is A, the blue to yellow line is B, and with those you can make any color you like. Now this is just the demo, so this is swap and sRGB, but pretty much the same story. sRGB is a lot bigger than CMYK, and even though it's not as big as P3 or Adobe RGB, it's way better than CMYK is in almost every way. There's a little lump of cyan there that can't be seen on screen. All right. Now, wouldn't it be better though if we're not using this grey blob, but one of these two blobs instead? Okay, whoops, stepping back. Now, sRGB is actually a fairly limited colour space, and there's a link to the WebKit wide profile example page that I talked about earlier. Because displays using today's devices can show a lot more colours, you could consider using that space as well. Now, Apple use the display P3 colour space. P3 is a wider colour space than sRGB. It's the one supported by an awful lot of devices from a range of manufacturers. So not just Apple, other companies have followed Apple's lead, and I would definitely recommend thinking about using P3 as the standard you want to use. There are others, and I'm sure you could get good results with other wide gamut profiles, but I'm using P3. Okay, now I'm not talking about HDR in terms of brightness. If you've come from the video realm, the wide gamut color thing is real there as well, but it's also tied into HDR for brightness. And where wide gamut gives you more colors, HDR is wide gamut for brightness levels. We won't go into that here. Brightness levels are a different thing. So if you just want it bright and you don't care about consistency, specify a wider profile. And one of the built-in ones that's easy to use on Adobe apps is called Image P3. I'm assuming there's some slight difference to Display P3, but for our purposes, who cares? And just use the brightest colors you can. So this is like using neon or spot metallics in print. So if you've got some of your audience, and I suspect a large chunk of your audience, who are probably using recent phones, slightly more expensive computers, then they will see super bright colors, but everyone else will see just slightly duller versions of those colors. Now, if you're putting out images that don't use the full P3 gamut, it'll still look the same to everyone. So really, if you use these a little bit, then you're not really going to lose out. People with standard older devices won't notice, and people who have newer devices will go, wow, what the heck's that? It's not less accessible, it's just a win. So Adobe apps do let you define a profile. So you'll find this command in the Edit menu, and then you can assign a profile to a file. Image P3 should be in your list. Now, InDesign, Illustrator, and Photoshop all do something slightly different when letting you choose RGB or CMYK colors. Just to briefly show you what they are. Photoshop, you can choose the color mode, and you can choose RGB here, and you can choose to assign a profile from the Edit menu here. In Illustrator, when you make a document, you have to choose if this is going to be CMYK or RGB. Print documents will be using CMYK. Film and video and most of the others here will use RGB. Once you've made a file like that, you can assign a profile just like you can in Photoshop. And InDesign, similar. When you make a new document, bring that over. If you choose print, you're making a CMYK file. If you choose web or mobile, you're going to make an RGB file. And that means you'll be using RGB swatches or CMYK swatches, and it also changes your transparency blend space. Make sure you change this to document RGB if you want to get the best looking transparent areas. Cool. Right, now, unfortunately, it isn't quite that simple. So different apps will approach things just a little bit differently. So if we're in InDesign, and so let's say this is InDesign, and here in InDesign, I've just defined some super bright colors, right? So I've assigned that P3 color space. So I've assigned image P3 as my current working space. It's also my profile. That's fine. And I'm just using some mega magenta, yellow, RGB cyan. So just the full strength things. This is as bright as you're going to get. And I've got some text here, which I've just assigned RGB red, RGB green, And you get the story. You get RGB magenta as well. And I've also embedded a file from Photoshop and a file from Illustrator just to see if they are treated the same way in the various kind of exports that you might want to do. And luckily, yes, they are. So you can use any of these apps, place things in InDesign, and they all get treated the same, which is really good. However, when you do an export to a PDF or interactive, it's always going to convert everything back to sRGB. Now, what I mean by this is if you go File, Export, and you choose to go PDF Interactive, and I'll just throw that on the name, you'll see here that there's no option to include a color profile, and there's no option here in compression. There's no option here at all. So unfortunately, you will lose your color profile and it just won't look super bright. That's a bummer. However, if you do a PDF for print, so you can of course convert to CMYK if you go to press, but if you go high quality, it'll keep the profiles in all of those images. Yay! So let me show you what I mean. If you were to export and do PDF for print, then high quality print, you can see under output, will do no color conversion and it will include tagged source profiles. Of course, you can include all profiles or all RGB, yada yada. So there is proper profile control when you do a print-based export. So that's good. All right. Now, if you were doing a press export, that would be press quality, and it would be doing convert to destination preserve numbers. So that'll send everything down to CMYK, which is great if you're sending this to a printer who wants CMYK, but very bad if you want to keep the best RGB colors. Cool. So flicking back to here. Now this was a bit of a surprise. If you export to JPEG, it keeps the current color profile. If you export to PNG, it doesn't. It converts everything to sRGB, and that's a real bummer. So there's not an easy way to go straight from InDesign to PNG and keep your color profiles. It's a real bummer. But when you go to JPEG, and I'll just, I have actually exported these already, but I'll just do this, embed color profile. And hey, look, this would be really fun if I discover that I'm actually wrong, but if I go to PNG, let's find out. There is no option to include a color profile. Why? Why? No, we need that. So you can't include a color profile with PNG. You can with JPEG, so JPEG wins if you need to send an image from InDesign. Make sure it's a JPEG. Okay, if you're coming out of Illustrator, same deal. JPEGs can look super bright because they include the profile, and PNG does not. So if somehow you can magically see this presentation in the video, then you should see that this is brighter than this. And definitely the PDF should reflect this if you're on a nice wide gamut display. The top is super nice and bright, and the bottom is not as bright as it should be. Just a bit duller, which is a shame. And from Photoshop, both Save for Web Legacy, the old way, and Export As, the new way, both let you include a profile. And PNG works if you include a profile in a PNG from Photoshop. So if you do need a PNG, you need to go via Photoshop. Now, I do have a bunch of files which I could show you, which demonstrate this. Let's just come out of here. Okay, finding files, training notes. Okay. Bunch of files. So, PSDs, yes. P3 profile, yes. Empire can work. But you can see here, even in the previews, a print file using high quality can have nice bright colors, but a print file using press is super dull. There's a PNG and a JPEG, and hopefully you can see the JPEG is super bright compared to the PNG. You could have super bright greens, magentas, cyans, yellows, just go crazy. Full strength RGB using the right profile, and that's all you need to worry about. You can see here that the magenta I've used here, because that was just originally a screenshot from InDesign, looks pretty flat in comparison to the crazy export there straight from Illustrator as a JPEG. So that's nice and clear. Whereas the ping, not quite as bright. It is a shame. All right. Now, because not many people found out about this presentation, there really won't be many questions, so I'm going to leave those to the comments under the YouTube or on Facebook. Thank you for watching this, and hopefully I'll be able to get the word out more about the next meeting. Cool. Thanks for watching. See you later. Bye-bye.